I'm not Liam Stonebridge. Just want to get that out of the way first. Liam, unfortunately, was flying in and his flight has been delayed, so he can't be with us. But you're going to have to put up with me, so my apologies. But perhaps we can just ask you to introduce yourselves, tell us what you do, and then we can go into our panel.
Morning, everyone. I've probably seen many of you at one of these events over the past years. Rebecca Wilmot. I work at JP Morgan in our London office. I'm responsible for a few areas. EMEA, so Europe, Middle East and Africa, as it relates to our tax services and product offering. And then from a global perspective, what we term as product delivery, which encompasses all the fun things like client matters, risk, and thought leadership activity, which is why I'm here. Thank you.
My name is Patrick Reedy. Please call me Paddy. I'm head of product and operational taxes for Europe and Asia for Capital Group. I work a lot with Rebecca, and it's probably good that Liam's not here because we're both Irish and we both have the gift of the gab, so this would take ages. So yeah, thanks for having me and looking forward to the discussion.
Fantastic. So after the last panel, obviously this is the one to really listen to. It's about tax, and perhaps that's where we will start off with. Is it really about tax? Because I mean, there was a traditional idea of a tax department where you had corporate tax guys, and once in a while they would dabble into some, BBSI returns, some sort of like client reporting. But then this growth of operational taxes and so on. What's your view? I mean, sort of like, is the scope of taxes departments changing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've been in this industry more years than I care to remember, but the benefit of that is you get a panoramic view of the decades. I think it's definitely the case that tax functions now, certainly in our area, are gaining a bigger advisory role. So we are being asked to provide strategic counsel on a range of areas, from digital business models, sustainability transformation, and so forth. So the nature of the work we're doing is and has absolutely changed. It's no longer the case that we are solely masters of one or a few areas of taxation. We are having to spread our wings and provide that counsel to a much wider range of areas. We're not just looking at withholding tax, as we have historically primarily done and been doing. We're now looking at a range of different tax types, new asset classes, new investment structures, new product launches, the list goes on. So one example, which I find interesting, and Helen was so eloquently talking about in her opening speech, is the whole area of ESG, which you wouldn't typically associate historically with our area of securities taxation. Obviously, since Trump's return to the White House, there has been a reigniting of battles around ESG principles, and there is a general anti-ESG sentiment across the US, make no bones about it. And there's a US organization that does provide a challenging environment, but it's definitely doesn't mean the end of ESG, and that's rightly so. So against that backdrop, we, like many others, consider and continue to consider ESG and what it means in the context of our services. tax continues to rise up the ESG agenda. It hits all of the E and the S and the G. The S I personally think is fascinating. That social aspect. It's not just about adhering to written laws, but it's about adhering to the unwritten laws in terms of behaving responsibly and how you evidence that. And of course, G and the governance, how you demonstrate your alignment to ESG principles as an organization. So from a service provider perspective, we have to keep abreast now of these types of newer areas which hit on our industry segment clients in order that we can respond to client servicing needs.
And that's quite interesting because I had a call only, I think it was yesterday, where a client was asking me around those boundaries that the tax function had with respect to, say, the financial crime team. And so I think there is definitely something in motion. And Paddy, you specifically, I'm sort of like your teams look after foreign markets, and I think the crossover between taxes and other regulatory things. I mean, presumably that's something that you're living through.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything Rebecca said to start with. I think, and one of the panel, this topic is the role of the in-house tax function and the future of the in-house tax function. And something you said at the opening speech is what resonates with me. There's a lot of stuff going on in my head right now, even just in that question. So every day you walk in with a plan, and that plan kind of gets ripped up by the time it gets to 9 o'clock. And if you think about operating models, so the role of the in-house tax function today and what you think it will be in the future, you've given us, 30, 40 minutes to talk about it. I've been working on that for 2 years and ripped up 5 different iterations of it because of changes in technology, AI, etc. So what you said is really pertinent. I would use a live example right now. The traditional role of the in-house tax function has been mainly operational, so first line of defense. That's evolved over time into the second line of defense, moving more into risk management and compliance and things. But beyond that now, we're being asked to actually spread our wings, as you said. And the live example is Section 899 of the One Big Beautiful Bill. What a name. Tax functions are going to have to understand the impact outside of tax to be able to give a good narrative and actually to give some good advice. And that advice is live advice. I've had 20 emails this morning on that subject. And by the time I get back to that chair, there's going to be 20 more. And it's not just about tax, but tax is being relied upon to actually understand what the impact might be on bond deals, what the impact might be on capital movements. And they're asking the tax function that because they want to bring the tax layer to it. So in the past, you're mainly based on operational tax figures, investor tax figures, withholding tax, etc. That, with the increase in technology, with AI, etc., is going to move. It's going to narrow. It's going to be easier. We're going to find outsourced and partner sourcing opportunities to do that, what we might call first level work. And the in-house tax function is going to have to become more than just a tax function. So I think, and I know there's a panel discussion on this later on, I think Bill Gates said, we often overestimate what will happen in 2 years and underestimate what will happen in 10. I think in AI, that's going to be the game changer. We're going to have to be fluent as tax folks in AI. It's not going to be something we can dabble in. If you're not fluent in it, that's not going to be good enough. So there's a lot going on in my head is what I mean, and I'll stop there, otherwise I'll be here all day.
Just interesting. So the 2 points, if I understand correctly, is one, that you're being asked to play a much wider advisory function, much broader than purely tax, working out the implications. And the other is around the shift from first line doing the work to perhaps outsourcing models and becoming more of taking on a governance second line function. Is that?
Yeah, that's essentially it. The first line is becoming, it depends on how good your narrative is in your own organizations, but the first line can be viewed as a cost center or a profit center. More and more, the first line is going to be a cost center, and that cost center is probably best placed outsourced or partner sourced because they can do it better because they have the expertise in the markets where you are. And then that second line is where you're going to have to create the narrative of the profit center, which is the advice, what value add are you bringing to your organization as a tax function. And that's going to require you spreading your wings, as Rebecca said.
So just following on from that point, the first line, if I can refer to it, that's going to require technology investment. Do you see that being undertaken by yourselves or your partners? How do you view that?
Yeah, so I think Paddy's right. Regulation remains our bread and butter, but it's continuing to get more complex and more voluminous. So as a tax function, this panel is about the future of us and how we work. We need to ensure we have a very keen technical approach, whilst at the same time working closely with, and we're going to say this a lot, this is the theme of the day, working closely with technology partners. So if we take a live example of some of the anti-abuse measures that have been going on for the last years in our space, so holding period requirements, which I think most people are familiar with, and at the moment, there's many and varied rule sets around the holding period rules. Obviously, Faster is looking to introduce harmonisation in that down the road, but we still need to deliver service in the meantime. So we look at it from a CAPEX, capital expense management perspective. It's suboptimal to invest dollars into building a per market solution. So then working closely with technology partners, it's about trying to develop and build a strategic umbrella architecture that allows you to then configure to the per market rules. So you're not undertaking development each time and you're not having to. But, again, I'm not convinced that means that tax professionals such as us need to become technology experts at all. What it does mean is we need to ensure that that translation effort between tax and technology is absolutely on point. And from an internal perspective, that you're able to bring together the right subject matter expertise within your organization and garner that senior stakeholder support in order to get the right approach and deliver the right solutions. But I think it's also to the point you're making about, so that's sort of from a technology perspective internally. And then we talk about risk management a lot. And we've all had to become much more expert in terms of risk management being a core part of our day-to-day duties. And interestingly, that bleeds into considering the commercial aspects of what we do as well. We are historically looking at regulation where arguably the liability was always levied at the beneficiary of the tax relief or the tax effect. And that's changed, and that's continuing to change. We see in the newer regulations a move to pass that liability on to others, including the service providers. So that's meant a couple of things. We have to shift and look at things like client contractual coverage. And are we ensuring that our service definition is clear enough so that everybody understands and knows the parameters within which we're delivering our services?
Yes.
So that's forcing us, rightly so, to work in a different way as well. We're working with areas like pricing design authorities and much more closely with legal that we've never had to do before as a typical tax function.
And that's really quite interesting. I spend a lot of time looking at LMA agreements and gross-up clauses and GIMSLAs and so on. And what you've got is an industry who's come together, come up with standard documentation, and of course there's tweaks and some bilateral discussions. Do you have that in your tax service offering? Do you have standard contracts across the industry?
Sorry to give me these questions, Ali.
That's behind.
Not in front of Paddy. I think everybody would say, certainly in the service provider industry, that we absolutely have standard tax language in our contractuals. But the relationships go on years and decades. And I would dispute that those contractuals have been reviewed and refreshed on a frequent and ongoing deliberate basis. So many service providers and Big Four have been looking at this area over the last 2 years plus, and it's not just about the contractuals. It's having a very clear and defined audit trail of paperwork between yourselves and your clients. That includes custody agreements or fund administration agreements and the tax language contained therein. It includes the content of SLDs, service level descriptions. Yeah. It includes your client-facing artifacts as it relates to service definition. It includes the tax language and the indemnifications thereof within your tax power of attorney. So it's a raft, it's a holistic view of that contractual coverage.
Indeed. So, I mean, Paddy, just looking at a slightly different perspective, but I think now that the matter of liability has been raised, I mean, there's obviously pressure you would get from your investors. I mean, they probably want to push some risk down. You've got tax authorities who also sort of like have a view on things like corporate criminal offences and so on. So they want to hold the intermediaries liable. I mean, how do you navigate that in your business?
I'll avoid trying talking about liability contracts and things like that because Rebecca's going to hope I don't call her tomorrow and have another conversation. There's a lot of different things in that question. I think coming back to the role of the in-house tax function and actually the skill sets and capabilities required in the team to be able to tackle these type of things, I think comes back to the original comment that Rebecca made around spreading your wings. You're having to need to know a lot more, cover a lot more ground, and understand the roles that each different function plays in the organization, including legal. This is where I think I come back to the previous panel, which was excellent, by the way. Tax being used as a political tool is now looking like the new norm. And this is where the skill sets of the tax function, especially the in-house tax function, is growing, because I started, and my first job was UK distributor status for funds. Now you're being asked to actually understand geopolitics to be able to bring a tax narrative to the organization. So if we look at what's happening with this US bill, if you look at what Europe is thinking about doing in terms of one of the concepts is that UTPR is one of the things the US are against. Are we going to keep UTPR, or are we going to actually get rid of it to satisfy some of the concerns that they have? And now Europe are thinking, well, actually, this might be a way to have capital move from the US into Europe and into Asia and other markets. You actually have to understand that as a tax person to be able to create narrative on, well, what do you think is going to happen with this bill as it goes through the Senate? You have to understand the geopolitics behind it before you can give a tax comment. And I think that's where, not to skip your question on liability, I just don't want to have that conversation on the stage with Rebecca. It's to say that the role of the tax function is becoming something where you cannot give proper tax advice at that second layer unless you actually understand the whole A to Z of the investment sphere and geopolitical sphere, etc. So
but I will just press ahead with the question still, because I mean, I think the expectation, particularly when you've got things like class actions looming in the background, I think investors are demanding more. Would you not agree with that?
We have a fiduciary responsibility to our investors, especially as an asset manager. Yeah. Investors are becoming more sophisticated in understanding the tax aspects. And look, it all started years ago with pressure on fees. Fees have come down. So where else can we get performance from? Pressure on tax. And actually the performance that comes after tax. So yes, we do have pressure from investors, but we always had that pressure. We have a fiduciary responsibility towards them. Now, where it's getting more difficult is the complex web of regulation that's coming in that are not exactly aligned, that they're contradicting each other, which then creates issues for our service providers, which then creates concerns for your profits in terms of how do you charge for tax services, whether it's now normally wrapped up in the custody agreements, and do you actually have to separate or not. So it's causing a chain. And yes, so we do have a responsibility. It's always been there.
Fantastic. Okay. You briefly mentioned the teams that you're running now. You've historically, presumably, I mean, Rebecca, you've got lots of people across the globe. I mean, they've probably had a training program. There was a profile of people you would hire. I mean, has that changed, or is that changing as we speak, particularly in light of technology?
The bit on technology is where I think we're going with this. No, I don't think so. I think the ultimate tax skill set that one needs to understand the rules remains the same. But what we have to do is think more broadly around the additional non-tax skill sets we need. So if we think about, I don't actually think this has been mentioned yet, which is amazing. If we think about data, data as a service, that's obviously a key area for us and our industry. And, it continues to rise in importance. And that's largely because the legislators are continuing to demand more granular client tax data. And we need to respond to that. We have large data lakes. We need to think about how we deliver on that. And part of the data skill is being able to identify the right data points at the right point in the right place and ETL it, extract, transfer and load it and convert it into the right formats. We've all dealt with schemas around the world and the differing requirements there. And as many organizations have this continual cycle of consideration around client reporting and data strategy. Many industry commentators talk about self-service being the new thing. So we consider in that context, things like API libraries, pulling the data. Clients can pull that data on their own. But to do that, you have to have a robust ability to define and catalog your data attributes, have a robust strategy governance framework around that to ensure it's maintained. So how do you do that and meet those organizational demands when you manage a tax department? And the answer is the same, whether we're talking about data, technology, or regulation in principle. You need to, it's about getting a blend of the correct subject matter expertise. It's about having, in that context, a marriage of tax specialism, technology experts, data strategists pulled together. And the skill now in roles that Paddy and I have is being able to garner and pull together that cross-functional legion in order to realize our wider remit and deliver on things like data. And this, same with technology in a way. That continues obviously to transform our industry, and from a service provider perspective, a lot of it's about efficiency, and that's changing again, the day-to-day roles and responsibilities that we have. If we think about AI, which a lot of people have already talked about today, and I'm sure it will continue to be talked about, and how that works for us and how we have to deliver on that, but yet we're still tax professionals. How do we do that? And AI is about bringing, from my perspective, people and machines together. It's being able to automate those routine tasks, which in turn allows us to deploy our partners to more high-value exercises. But you've still got to, in my opinion, have humans validate that AI-generated content for quality and control, particularly in tax, where there's a need for, absolute accuracy, auditable accuracy. Whilst, yes, we all need to become, as many have discussed already, more fluent in AI, and it's not in dispute that AI can impressively mimic human expertise, it can't mimic human emotions yet. It can't mimic human communications. Yeah. So we have to think about that in the context of another of our strings to our bow, which is delivering on technology solutions to help efficiency. So we work, again, closely with experts in the organisation, and you just have to sort of Google JP Morgan and AI and you'll see it all there in its glory. It's a big part of the organisation's strategy to deliver that and make sure that we're getting that, pulling together that critical blend of SME. And there's also, let's be honest, AI has been used in tax for years, but it's mainly been used in compliance. And the point is, it's there now to be exploited for other areas. Indeed. But to do that successfully, the tax function has to come out of a silo and has to proactively engage with the right people in the business. And that increased integration, I believe, generates more collaboration. So our role is to understand how we integrate it into our function and what the pros and cons of that are.
What do you think?
I agree with everything Rebecca said in terms of we have a role now to spread our wings within the organization. And I think that everything you said around data technology and the skill sets required there are completely correct. The one thing I'd add is soft skills. So the days of having a tax function of 30, 40 people where someone's a stamp duty expert, someone's the VAT expert, someone's in charge of India, someone's investor taxes, someone's in distribution, etc., they're probably on the decline. So tax functions are going to shrink. In-house tax functions are going to shrink because we're going to outsource the other aspects of it, or partner source. So that soft skills come in. Before, you could rely on those experts to kind of stay in their area and they'd run a mile if they had to give a presentation. Now, everyone that has their role in the in-house tax function is going to have those soft skills. They're going to have to be comfortable speaking across the organization. They're going to have to be able to explain complex concepts in simple terms to senior folks, etc., and other teams. The last thing I would say is that, and this comes back to the first panel discussion again, if we look at the US as an example, and I hate to pick it out, it's just an easy one right now. If you look at Doge, they went around going into government organizations, public organizations, reducing the staff. All that's after doing really is actually having a brain drain from the public side of things into the private side of things. People were doing the public side because they wanted to give back. They liked it, but it probably wasn't paid that much. They're going into the private sector. If you look at the new drafting of the 899 narrative, it's very simplistic, but the complexity that comes with it and the ultimate impact is huge. We internally now have to help with the advocacy work, so helping to educate the people who've just written it what the actual outcome of it will be. So for the last week, we've been working with our government affairs teams and actually all the other firms, trying to actually speak to senators, speak to the policy drafters, say, this is not what you think is going to happen from what you've written. And that's going to have to be another skill set there as well, which is actually having to educate the people who are drafting the legislation.
This is a very interesting topic, one which is close to my heart, because traditionally accountancy firms like ours practices, we have provided the staff for firms like yours. And I think we're having to rethink the model. And to Rebecca, your point, yes, of course, AI is there, technology is there, and we're going to leverage that. But the need for critical analytical skills is far greater now than ever before, because these LLM systems, they basically put material out there and it looks really good. So if you don't know what you're dealing with, this could be really dangerous. And I would say the other trend, I mean, I've got Hector, my friend, and also co-host of the Tax Files, shameless self-promotion there, here with us.
That sounds like you, Ali.
Never. And I was having a discussion with Hector, who looks after a lot of recruitment and movement, staff movements. What we have seen within the financial services tax personnel is a lot of senior people, talent is going away, retiring. And I'm not sure the depth of that expertise is being replenished quickly enough. So I think that's going to be a real challenge.
And if I might just add to that as well, Ali, that's one end of the sort of the age spectrum. Then this is why I think our area is fascinating as well at the moment. You look at the other age, so we study the different generational cultures and the different strengths and weaknesses of those, including our own. And as we're looking at our talent strategy, you're also looking at just that end of the spectrum, also the graduate end of the spectrum up, and they don't know anything else other than how to look up something on ChatGPT.
Exactly.
We were talking about this last night, Mariano, or AI, and present company accepted, I'm sure. And so we need to counsel, that's wonderful, and we're probably not as literate in ChatGPT, but the content needs to be validated. It might not, shock horror, always be entirely correct, and that's news to certain generations.
Exactly. Just on that one, it's interesting. We did a study that, because we're, like, part of our job is the next generation, right? It's succession planning, and the next generation to come into the workforce, the study showed that they will only concentrate in 12 to 14 minutes spans. Yeah. Because
13 minutes is the sweet spot, apparently.
Yeah. And so for that, our old way of training people was sit behind the screen and we're going to sit here with you for the whole day and teach you how to do something. It just won't work.
Absolutely. And I think there's a fantastic, I'm sure you all know Daniel Goleman, who does the work around emotional intelligence. A lot of his research work now is around focus, because the distractions are, particularly in the area like tax, where you have to have that, when you're doing deep tax, it's a process you need to be able to think through to the fifth sort of iteration. That our talent is not being trained in that fashion. Something simple like, you've got a screen, and sometimes my colleagues will bring their screen to me and there's these pop-ups, and I'm thinking, you can't do that as a tax advisor. You can't be distracted. So I think there is definitely something there. And to the point, by the way, a lot of my peers, many of them have retired, and much to the annoyance of my colleagues, they keep asking when will I retire, and I've got white hair, and I tell them I'm not going to retire, they're going to have to take me out. Anyway, we have a question.
The future of the in-house tax department, if the fairy queen comes along and you have 3 wishes, 1, 2, 3 wishes, is there something you would ask of your advisors?
Could you repeat the question?
You want me to repeat the question? So Stefan's asking, if we had 3 wishes, what would we ask of our advisors?
Cheaper.
Cheaper?
Sorry.
Easier contractuals? I think that, and I'm sure Paddy agrees with this, I think as in general, as our world's got more complex, there can't be, it's too linear to think there is a one-stop shop in terms of servicing models. So therefore, one has to adjust and look at what their optimal tax servicing model is. As asset classes change and get more complicated, as tax rules change and get more complicated, as the data piece overarching everything gets more demanding and the tax authorities are asking for more data points that different parties in the chain may or may not have, etc. So understanding where an outfit like an advisory firm fits into that overall tax servicing model and being able to work collaboratively and in partnership as service providers in that vein, I think is going to become really important.
Yeah, I'll just add it. There's a difference between outsourcing and partner sourcing, and you use the word partner sourcing. I think that's the main thing. It's be a true partner, which is, Ali and I had this discussion a few days ago around, could you completely replace an in-house tax function? My answer, personally speaking, is definitely no. You will not understand the intricacies of the internal workings of an organization. But to be a true partner, you need to try to know that. And because in-house tax functions will decrease as the use of AI and technology and things increases, it's not because we will lose jobs, it's more we won't need to expand as we grow into new markets, into new assets, etc. We'll be able to do more with what we already have. But that's where partner sourcing comes in. You'll need to understand the intricacies of our internal workings even more. It's not just outsourcing, it's not doing a UK tax calculation, it's understanding what that means in our product strategy going forward and what type of products we're thinking of launching. You'll need to know more about our strategy and our core values and what we stand for than just simply doing the task. I think that's where the added value comes from.
Fantastic. Well, we can take very quick, short question.
You talked about the geopolitical implications of taxation and how that is changing the way that in-house taxation kind of is evolving. Are you hiring? Do you think that there will be more people who are from non-tax background going to be part of the tax or supplementing what in-house tax department does? And second, how are you responding to the concerns from your clients about 899 or the geopolitical issues?
You take one of them. Okay, keep it short. We'll just let
Not
it.
taking the 899. I can't remember what the first one was.
It's around, are you going to bring more non-tax people in?
Yes. Sorry, thank you, Paddy. So I think it goes back to what we've been talking about thematically through this session, which is no, I don't think personally. I think the answer is understanding again the different skill sets that are needed in order to realise your roadmap effectively and your strategy. So the tax function specialism remains and should remain. That's our core backbone, but it's being able to pull in the other specialisms within an organisation to enable you to realise your strategy.
Excellent.
On 899, 899. I'm going to start by saying I work for a US organization, so I need to walk a particular line. On 899, my approach is you need to make sure that the right folks internally are aware of what's happening, but it's shifting sands. So the way it's currently drafted could have huge implications, and there's a lot of uncertainty as to what it actually impacts. Does it override exempt portfolio interests, etc.? The way it's written right now, it very well could possibly, even though their intent is not to do so. So it's shifting sands. There's a lot of work being done in the next week. So I would say client communication should remain factual and not try to predict what's going to happen, because you can't predict what's going to happen.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think one thing that for me from this session was, you've got two senior tax leaders who have been in the profession, who are at the top of two extremely well-respected organizations, and their insights that they've shared are really valuable. So if we can just show our appreciation. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.